So in this video we will look at Aristotle's take on happiness and the morally good life by considering his Nicomachean ethics. Now the beauty about Aristotle's ethics is that a morally good life is no contradiction to a happy life. Rather, for Aristotle both only persist together, and he connects the happy life with the morally good life, and the keyword here is virtue. But how exactly can we live a happy life and a morally good life at the same time? And doesn't this sound too good to be true? Let's find out. So first on happiness. Basically, Aristotle's take on happiness is all about a rational relation to our passions. For him, there are two unique things about us humans. We have rationality and we are end-seeking, striving beings. So regarding our striving, what we ultimately always seek at the end for Aristotle is happiness, eudaimonia in ancient Greek. However, the only way to really become happy in this striving is when we stick to our rationality and employ it, because it is what is unique to us, what makes us human. It is, as he calls it, our inherent purpose, or ergon in ancient Greek. But how exactly should we use that rationality in our practical life to become happy? Because we're certainly not entirely rational beings. We have desires, hate, fear, greed, all sorts of passions. Good thing is, Aristotle knows that, and he knows how to pay credit to our chaotic emotional life, while still showing us a morally good and happy life not without our passions, but with them. He does this by calling for a rational relation to our passions, or as he calls it, disposition, hexis in ancient Greek. Now, it does not mean that this disposition should push back all passions. Instead, it should channel our passions through that rational disposition. But how exactly should that disposition look like? Well, for Aristotle, it should aim at the middle of the extremes of that passion it is confronted with. This middle is called the mesotis in ancient Greek. So Aristotle just wants to push back on the extremes of our passions, not passions as such. He calls these extremes the excess, the too much, and the shortage, the too little. Just to give you an example, you don't want to be impulsive and you don't want to be impassive. Both extreme passions will not make you happy for Aristotle. Instead, you should aim with your rationality at the middle of the extremes, which is being tempered. This decision that we make between the two extremes is called the right insight by Aristotle, or in ancient Greek, prohairesis. Now you might object, well, that sounds all fine, but how on earth can I influence my passions just like that? Isn't that naive from Aristotle? Well, actually not, because Aristotle knows about that difficulty, and he knows that passions are a powerful force that we can't control just like we wish to. However, what we can do for Aristotle is over time developing and strengthening that disposition towards our passions, which looks like the following, and the keywords will be disposition, action, and attributes. So let's imagine you are an impulsive person. You can't control your anger. You can step by step try to develop over time a disposition that channels this impulse when it arises. This leads to a less impulsive action, which also empowers your disposition, because that less impulsive action supports, so to speak, the disposition that aims at being less impulsive. Now for Aristotle, doing all this over and over again, we eventually develop attributes. Like when you're a chill dude, you're less likely to call someone bad names or get angry and so forth, because being chilled or tempered is the attribute. And this attribute got constituted by doing less impulsive actions. So what we actually have is kind of a positive feedback loop of a disposition that leads to an action. That action leads over time to an attribute. That attribute leads to an action, and this action again supports and enhances that disposition, which again leads to an action, and so forth, until things become habit, which is the most powerful factor for Aristotle. So just as a little side remark, all this stuff about developing habits and whatnot by some fancy life coaches is actually nothing modern. It is ancient in a good way. By the way, let me know what you think about this topic in the comments down below, and let me know which topics you would like me to cover in the future. Now you might say, where is the morally good life so far? We had passions and us dealing with them passions, but where is ethics? Basically, we can just exchange the word attribute that got formed by finding the middle between the extremes of our passions again and again with the morally good, which is virtue for Aristotle, or arete in ancient Greek. And being virtuous is good, at least in ancient Greece, and I would even say today, because it's certainly not a bad trait of someone if you say, well, that's a virtuous person. So let's take, for example, that classic ancient virtue of bravery. Imagine a person which is terribly scared of spiders. Now, this person is already brave when it just looks at a picture of a spider. But I, for example, can only be called brave when I let a big spider walk over my arm or something. Because, and this is important, I am not afraid of looking at a picture of a spider, but I'm afraid of letting a big spider walk over my arm. In other words, when you do not deal with a passion, in this case fear, you are not virtuous, because you don't find that middle mesotis to that passion of fear, because you don't deal with that passion anyway. Like when you're not scared of spiders at all, there's just nothing brave about letting that spider walk over your arm or even face. So dealing with your passions and finding the middle between the extremes of your passions is A, the way to a happy life, because you're using that specifically human trait, your rationality, and B, the real virtuous and morally good life. So in a nutshell, what is a happy and a morally good life for Aristotle? Well, they're pretty much the same. A happy life is a life that is not entirely driven and blindly driven by passions, but a life that has a, one could say, healthy disposition to the passions by using your rationality, with the right insight in the middle between the extremes of that passion, which results in attributes. Now for the morally good life, we can exchange attributes with virtues, because basically virtues are also the right insight between the extremes of your passions, but an insight, and this is the only catch, which has to be done all over again and again and again, because you're not virtuous if you do one thing just once. You know, you have to do it again and again. It's like attributes as well. An attribute doesn't get formed by just doing one thing one time. Now, as a final remark, some of you guys may have noticed that Aristotle doesn't give us single actions to do. He has no catalog of things we have to do in life to become happy or to live a morally good life. You know, there isn't 10 things to do in life, the ultimate life hack to become happy, your coach Aristotle. And I think it's for a good reason, and it's also a strong suit of Aristotle. Simply because it just doesn't make any sense to apply single standard actions to all humans with their vast variety and intensity of passions. Some people might be more impulsive by nature, and even their developed disposition and attribute and virtue of temperance is even more impulsive than the temperance of someone else who is less impulsive by nature. And this is perfectly fine for Aristotle, that people have different middles, different mesotises, different kinds of virtues in a quantitative scale, so to speak. You know, this person which is less impulsive by nature and is now tempered is still tempered, and this person which is more impulsive by nature and is now tempered is also has the virtue of temperance. This is all fine for Aristotle as long as both persons really try to find this middle between the extremes of their passions. By this, Aristotle both pays credit to our individual personality while still demanding the task of finding a mesotis, the middle, in the extremes of our passions. Now, instead of a catalog of actions or specific calls to action, so to speak, you have kind of a skill set with that virtues, or better, a characteristics, your attributes that get formed. This character lets you behave properly in every possible situation, so there is no need to have single actions one has to do, because every single action is ultimately always just a result of our attributes or virtues. Or put simply, it is our character, our personality, our virtues, our attributes that matter, and not the actions, because the actions come second. They are only the result of the former. So again, let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments down below. And also, if you're interested in more philosophy takes, make sure to subscribe to this channel and tell me what topics you would like me to cover. I already said that. And yeah, stay tuned.